All right, what is up, Utah fans? This is Joseph back with the Utah Utes Football Digest, and today we are going to be talking about the battle in the trenches. So, Utah's offensive line versus USC's defensive line, and Utah's defensive line versus USC's offensive line. This is where most football games are won and lost. We're going to talk about the advantages, disadvantages to both sides. It'll be a lot of fun. We're going to really do a deep dive here and talk about each player that's going to be getting a lot of reps. Before we do that, please make sure you guys smash the like button. That'll help get it out to more football fans. Also, comment down below. Do you think Utah's offensive line dominates USC's defensive line? Do you think vice versa? Do you think Utah's defensive line dominates USC's offensive line? A lot to talk about. Before we get into it, please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We put out a ton of Utah Utes football content. If you are a big Utah Utes football fan, please make sure you subscribe. We are hitting the meat of the season where things really kick off. So make sure you stick around for the ride and share the video with someone, on Facebook or just a friend who would find it interesting, retweet it, whatever. On that note, let's dive in and go Utes. All right, guys, and let's take a look at Utah's defensive line versus USC's offensive line. So you take a look here. USC's offensive line is looking at. We're going to take the average of these two. So we're going to take the season average and the last three average and use the average of those two to get our number. So 6.64 and then 10.53. All right. Then we divide by 2. So USC is averaging between those two about 8.58 sack percentage allowed. Now, Utah's defense is looking, you take the average of 10.87 and 14.02. We're looking at about 12.4%. So you take 12.4, yeah, that's 8.6. That's going to be looking at 21. So 21 divided by 2, that's 10.5%. Utah should be looking at a 10.5% sack percentage on USC. That's a really good sign. Now let's go ahead and look at sacks per game. Oh, by the way, Brian Ankrum, aka San Antonio Ute, at San Antonio Ute, is the one that gathered all this info and sent it over to me. So shout out to him. Thanks for the help. And then sacks allowed per game and sacks per game. So Utah here in 2023, we're looking at 4. The last 3, we're looking at 5. So I'm going to say 4.5 sacks per game average for Utah. For USC, we're looking at 2.4. So we're looking at 3.2 sacks per game. They're averaging allowed here. So we take 3.2. We add that to 4.5. And the average of those two. So we're looking at 3.85 sacks. So we're close to 4 sacks. So we should be expecting about 4 sacks for Utah with a 10.5% sack percentage. And don't forget, guys, Caleb Williams loves the scramble, loves the buy time in the pocket. So if we're getting 10.5% sack percentage on Caleb, that means we're probably at around a 20 plus percent hurry percentage, which would be really, really good. If we can get a lot of pressure back there, keep them uncomfortable, and keep contain on them, that'll be a good sign for Utah. All right, guys, and let's take a look here. So take a look. We'll start with Utah's defensive line, and the defensive interior has not been amazing on the year. No one's really been playing exceptionally well. I think the games do show that outside a few flashes here and there. I haven't been super impressed with the interior. I think Keanu Tanavasa is probably the best guy off the top of my head, just with the eye test. And it's not that he's playing terrible. It's below average. It's not bad. A little bit of that scheme, right? Like probably Junior Tafuna is not quite as bad as that grade says, but the defensive interior for Utah has not been amazing this year. I think it's better than it shows because of the scheme and what they're asked to do. But is what it is, right? Is what it is. I think the defensive interior for Utah has not been great. Now, what has been great for Utah over the past for this whole first half of the season has been the edge rushers. These guys get in there and they dominate, right? Sad to see Logan Fano out. That's a big hit, right? That's a big hit. But Jonah Ellis is one of the best edge rushers in college football. He really is. He is elite. He's an animal. He is going to come at your quarterback and try to ruin his day and ruin his season. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Looks like the nicest guy in the world, but he is a monster. The good thing for us, we have a lot of other guys. Connor O'Toole didn't grade out super well, and neither did Van Fillinger. And those are kind of the two guys that have been rotating in. So it doesn't have me with a super high amount of confidence, but I've seen some flashes from Fillinger. Is what it is there. I think at the edge position, we're going to have to rely on Jonah Ellis to get back there, especially at the D line. I'd say just off the surface, let's see how USC looks, but not looking amazing for Utah at the gate now that, um, you know, not looking great. Okay, so USC offensive tackles looking pretty damn good here, right? Looking pretty good. This guy's a 77.7. These other two are 68.4, 69.1. So pretty good tackles. I think Jonah Ellis will dominate against either one of these guys. I think he will make him have a bad day, even though they're all pretty good. And this guy's very good, but he's not going to hold in there against Jonah Ellis. Jonah Ellis is going to make him have a bad day. Like I said, Jonah Ellis is an elite pass rusher. And then for guards, let's take a look here for USC. Okay, so this is a good sign, right? For guards, their actual starting guards, these two guys, Kingston and Pregnon, uh, they played a ton of snaps and they're, below average grades. They're not terrible, but they're below average, which our defensive interior, again, like I said, a lot of it's scheme, but these guys aren't killers, this USC offensive line. So that's a good sign for us. It looks like they're really good pass blockers and pretty below average to bad run blockers. So let's check out their center as well. Let's see how he's doing. All right, for USC, the center. Okay, so average center, Justin Diedick. So guy, pretty good pass blocker, pretty good run blocker. Overall, a very average grade, 65.1. So as I look at this, just quick comments before we move to the next group. Let's touch on how this is looking at the gate. Okay, so we've heard a lot about this Utah offensive line, and personally, I've heard a lot of negative that they're not very good. I'd say that's not what I saw in the grades. I'm just going to be transparent. That's not what the grades showed. That's not what I'm looking at here, right? And I do think our sack numbers look good. So I'd say this, right? Jonah Ellis is the kingpin of this D line, and he's going to need a big game, right? The defensive interior hasn't been showing up, so hopefully they explode. Hopefully Connor O'Toole and Van Fillinger are ready to have a big game. But I'm guessing we're going to see a good chunk of double teams on Jonah Ellis. Not that that will stop him. I still think even if he's double teamed every play, the guy's getting a sack in the game. But he's going to need to make some plays off some double teams, and the other guys are going to need to step up and make some plays. The good news for us is we looked at the sack percentages, right? We're looking at a little over 10% is what we should be expecting for the sack rate when we play this offensive line. That's a really good sign, right? Not to mention that that's not even including hurries. Caleb Williams is hard to sack. And so if we're sacking him 10% of the time, that probably means we're hurrying him in the 15 to 20% range, which would be really good and actually sounds realistic. I just think a lot of it's going to have to come from a big game for Jonah because the most of the PFF grades are, break even for Utah outside of Jonah Ellis and Utah's offensive line versus our defensive line. So that's the matchup there. All right, guys, and now we are going to break down USC's defensive line versus Utah's offensive line. So let's take a look here. So QB sack percentage for Utah on the season, it's 7.75. And on the last 3 games, it is 9.09. So we take the average of those two. Let's pull it up. Boom, 7.75 plus 9 point, or let's call it 9.09. All right, and then you divide, boom. Okay, so 8.4. And then Utah's sack percentage down here. So at what percentage of pass plays does USC's defense get a sack? So 8.49 plus 5.66 equals, boom, divide, boom. Okay, so Let's take the average of those two numbers. 8.4 plus 7 equals divided by 2. Okay, so USC should be looking to get a sack against Utah 7.7% of the time. So right out the gate, we should see a lot less of a sack percentage for our offense than we should for USC's offense against our defense. And then actual sacks per game. So USC is averaging about 2.5 sacks per game. And then we look at sacks allowed per game. Utah's averaging about 2.15 sacks allowed per game. So you take the average of those two, it's looking at about, like 2.25, 2.3 sacks allowed per game. So they should get, they might get a couple sacks on us, but nothing crazy. So that's how the numbers are breaking down there. All right, guys, let's break down the PFF grades. For this, we're going to start with the USC defensive line. So Solomon Byrd and Anthony Lucas are the best graded guys, but it looks like Jameel Muhammad and Solomon Byrd are the guys that get the most reps. So Jameel Muhammad actually has 6 sacks on the year, but he's not grading out incredibly well. I mean, above average pass rusher, but outside of that, not a very good run defender. Solomon Byrd is clearly the best edge rusher they have. A little above average in coverage, but a good pass rusher and a good run defender. So that's what they got there. Good. I mean, Solomon Byrd's a good edge rusher, and it looks like these guys get in on some rotation. But Jameel Muhammad is probably not as scary as you might have thought if you just look at the sack numbers. So Solomon Byrd looks really good, though. All right, let's take a look here. Okay, and then let's move on to the interior defenders for USC. Okay, so you've heard a lot about a guy named Bear Alexander. He is above average. He's not great. He's a above average run defender and an above average pass rusher, and he's above average in coverage. Okay. Now, this guy here, Keon Bars, not a ton of snaps. It looks like these guys all must rotate in and out, and Bear is the one that stays in there. So Bear's above average, but not great. So I'm not super intimidated by that. And don't forget, a lot of those grades are against not good talent. Utah did not play as easy of a schedule as they did. I'll touch on that a little later. So let's move on. All right, now we're looking at the Utah offensive line. Let's take a look here. Seitawa Laumea has looked very good on the season. A 70.6 is a good grade. Pass block 72.3. That's a very good grade. Run block 72.3. He's a very good run blocker, and pass block an average grade of a 64.8. So not amazing on the year, but very good. I'm very happy with how Seitawa Laumea looks, and especially he's such a good run blocker. It bodes well for probably what our game plan is going to be against these guys. The concern comes at left tackle. So Spencer Fano has been the guy all year until last week against Cal, where Tanoa Togiai was in. He's a 50 grade. Didn't get above 60 against Cal in his grade, so pretty concerning there. Really bad pass blocker and a bad run blocker as well. Um, you know, Left tackle's a concern for sure, especially with the good group of edge rushers these guys have and are likely going to try to attack us with when we throw the ball. So we need to find someone that's a good run blocker, right? Good thing is, not terrible at guard right now. Both the game plan is going to be to run guys, and Mokofisi and Keaton Bills are above average run blockers, almost good run blockers, almost identical, 66.9 and 66.8. Love to see that. I really do. I'm really happy about that. I think that bodes well for our ability to run, right? Seriously, whoever's at left tackle, just put a good run blocker in. And on obvious passing downs, he's just going to have to sell out for the pass. But so far, it looks really good for us to be able to run the ball. Let's go ahead and pull up our center here. Boom. I do want to see something here. Boom. Okay. Jaron Kump's been the guy basically all year, but I do believe there was a change. I'm trying to remember what it was. Okay, let me see here. Where is it? Got to find the guy. Give me 1 second here. So Kolinu U Fa'ayu. I think that's how you say that. Not trying to butcher your name. It's a tough one. But this was the guy that was playing center against Cal and actually got 75 snaps. So we were messing around with the offensive line, trying some stuff out. Not terrible, right? An average run blocker, bad pass blocker, but is what it is there. So I'd say some of the adjustments. I mean, I'm fine with Jaron Come too. He's a little more well rounded, but not as good of a run blocker, right? And if we could get Johnny Maia back, he didn't grade out well on the year, but he only played 8 snaps, so it is what it is. Is what it is. Just moving on. That's the PFF grade. So let's go ahead and end it, and then we'll recap it. All right, guys, and I think as we break down the Utah offensive line versus the USC defensive line, I feel pretty good about it. Honestly, I was a little worried because I knew our offensive line had not been spectacular, but after breaking down the numbers a little bit, they're not bad against the run, but they're no better against the run on their defensive line than we are on our offensive line. Like it looks like we'll be able to move people on the offensive line at least a little bit. And I think where the real advantage will come in for us is the running backs, our explosive running backs. So that looks good. I think both groups looked pretty even as far as what we're going to be trying to do. I definitely was not feeling like their D line would dominate our O line. And it feels like every game our O line has gotten better, which is a good sign for us. So, just to kind of recap both groups, I feel like on our D line against their O line, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jonah Ellis to get back there and make plays. And if he is double teamed, then the pressure will go a different direction, and there will be a lot of pressure on the defensive interior and whoever's playing edge rusher opposite Jonah Ellis to get in there and get pressure. If you have one-on-ones and he's double teamed, you need to find a way to get back there and make something happen. I'd say I'm not concerned about that matchup, but I'm probably less confident after breaking it down with the PFF grades than I was before, right? What made me pretty confident was the actual stats about our sack percentages and our sacks per game. We're looking to get about 4 sacks against USC from what the numbers say, and average about 10.5% sack percentage on them, which means we'll have a really high hurry rate. So I like how the numbers look. I don't love how the PFF grades look, but is what it is. If we can meet those two somewhere in the middle, our defensive line should have a pretty good day. And then with our offensive line, I think we look pretty decent run blocking against USC. If we have to pass a lot, we're going to struggle. This is not a pass blocking offensive line. So we need to make sure that is not the case and that we do a good job running the ball and only have to pass when we want to, not when we need to, if that makes sense. So really exciting game, guys. In the trenches, it should be a good matchup. I think a lot of Utah fans are thinking we're going to dominate them in the trenches. I think it could happen. I think it definitely could happen. I wouldn't say it's a guarantee. I think confidently they won't dominate us in the trenches. I think that's a good sign. So, is what it is, guys. Smash the like button if you guys enjoyed the breakdown and getting to see all these numbers. Also, comment down below, what do you think is going to happen for both matchups? How do you feel Utah's offensive line does against USC's defensive line, and vice versa? How does Utah's defensive line do against USC's offensive line? I want to hear what you guys think. Also, subscribe to the channel. It's the meat of the season, guys. Tons of good games coming up. Make sure you guys stick around and are a part of the community we got here. And share the video with someone. Share with a friend, retweet it, share it on Facebook, whatever. I'm out of here, and go Utes.